Welcome to Spreadsheet Geek. In this lesson, we'll talk about those dollar signs you see in formulas and how to use them to good effect. This video was made using Microsoft Excel 2019. Today we're going to talk about relative versus absolute references. Let's open up this workbook I've prepared. I would consider this to be a pretty crucial topic if you want to save time and set up nice spreadsheets with inputs and outputs. So I've laid out some math problems here. Let's go ahead and use the Autosum feature to calculate the sum of those two numbers, and to no one's surprise, it's 5. Now you can copy formulas and paste them into other cells. So what happens when we paste that formula over here? It becomes the sum of these two numbers. So Excel changed that formula from A1 to A2 to C1 to C2. And if I paste it down here to the right, it's going to change it to E7 and E8. These are what's known as relative references. You can always tell a relative reference because if you look at the formula, it's just a letter and a number. There are no dollar signs in that reference. So wherever I paste this formula, it's always going to look at the two cells above as inputs. Let's try something different. Let me clear out those results there, and we'll go back to this formula. If I go up to the formula bar and I click my mouse here to the left of, in the middle of, or to the right of that factor, and I press the F4 key once, I'm going to get dollar signs in front of both the column and the row. If I press F4 again, by the way, I just get a single dollar sign by the row reference. If I press it a third time, it shifts to the column reference. And if I cycle all the way through with a fourth press of F4, I go back to relative reference. So let's go with the absolute reference on both of these. And once again, we're going to copy this formula. And what happens when we paste it in now? We get a 5 there, and we get a 5 there. So this is an example of an absolute reference. All of these formulas are written exactly the same, and they all reach back to cells A1 and A2. Let's look at an example of how you can use an absolute reference to good effect. In this company, we're calculating our expected credit card fees for the year, for 5 years actually. So we just sell one product, everybody buys it with a credit card, and all of the credit cards that we accept charge the same rate. Not a realistic example. We'll ignore shipping and sales tax and everything else too. So my expected fee rate, and I'm going to go ahead and format this cell in a particular way. Excel likes to project these, suggest these shadings. That's an input cell, and I'm going to say that my credit card fee that I expect is 2.6%. So my merchant fee, when I partner with these credit card companies, is going to be 2.6% times my expected sales. And I get that result. And then I come over here, and I can multiply 2.6% times the 2021 sales. That's the hard way to do it, okay? Now let's do it the easy way. We'll go back to this formula here. So for each of these cells, I'm always going to reach back to this 2.6%. So let's make that content of cell C3 by hitting the F4 key an absolute reference. And now it's still the same here for 2020, but I can just use the autofill function and everything has calculated in an instant. This is really nice. It's a nice way to set up your worksheets, particularly if you're doing scenarios or you have variables that are changing or floating around in a range. If I find out that my credit card fee just went up to 2.8%, everything can be recalculated in an instant. Let's look at one more example, and it'll bring in another way to use absolute and relative references, and that is with when you hold the column constant and let the row float. So you can have an absolute column and a relative row, or vice versa. In this company, we sell 3 products, product A, B, and C. We have a total sales expected, and let's go ahead and fill that in. We'll make that an input cell, and we'll assume that we expect $5 million in total sales. So these are the months of our year, and we're a seasonal business, as many businesses are. So we expect 9% of our sales in January, 12% in February, and so on. They kind of taper off in the fall and then start ramping back up. We have 3 products. I don't know which one's the most expensive product, but 40% of sales are expected from product A, 35% from B, and so on. So if I want to calculate this sales level for this cell, it would be January's product A sales. I'm going to multiply 5 million times 9 times 40%. And I get that result. And I'm going to go on to the next cell and do the same thing, and then I'm going to start on the second row. And that's really a hard way to do it. The easy way to do it is to use absolute and relative references. So what's the absolute reference? Well, for all of these formulas that I'm going to plug in, I know I'm always going to reach back to the total sales, and that is in B4. So let's make that an absolute reference by hitting F4 and putting in double dollar signs. What about the monthly portion of sales? 9% in January. So the way that makes this easier to think about is think about as you move right and paste this formula into new cells. What do you want to change and what do you want to stay the same? So in this C7, I'm going to want the column to change to D and then E. So I want a floating column, but all of those numbers are in row 7. So I want the 7 to remain constant as I move across here. So let's put the dollar sign, and I'll use the F4 key, and I'm going to hit it once, twice, and that's all I need. I've got a dollar sign in front of the 7. What about the contents of B8? This is the monthly percentage of product A. As I move to the right, I'm always going to want to reach back to column B, no matter how far I get to the right. But as I go down through rows, I'm actually going to want to change rows. So in this case, I want the letter to remain constant, and I'm going to type in a dollar sign before the column letter for this one. So there's our formula. It's the same result, but look what we can do. We can autofill it over and autofill it down. And the sum total of all this is $5 million. We can clean up our spreadsheet a little bit here. Autofill this down. And we get a nice looking table of expected sales in each month. Now, why is this so helpful? Let's go ahead and make these input cells, because they really are, and we'll call these input cells as well. And now, I just found out that this is actually 45%, and we don't expect to sell as many of these. This will be 20%. Or, oh, you know what? I think I'm a little more optimistic with the overall economy. I think we'll do 505.2 million. Or, excuse me, 52 million. Extra zero there. So you can make these little adjustments very easy and tweak these formulas as long as they still add up to 100%. You're good. This is how you use absolute and relative references, and you can use partial absolute and relative references within any factor. If you've liked the content of this video, please hit my subscribe button. And if you want to be reminded when I put new content on YouTube, click on the little bell next to the subscribe button. Thanks for visiting Spreadsheet Geek.